So I don't know if I actually mentioned who I am. I'm the co-founder and CEO of DisruptCRE. My name is Mariel Ebrahimi. I'll be the moderator for this session. I just ask each of you gentlemen to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Samoylovich. I'm a co-founder of Cedar Street Companies and Flats, along with Lively.
Brian Johnson. I'm here with 94 Ventures. We're a venture company that invests in property technology. So really anything in the built world, real estate related.
And so one of the questions that I just want to kind of soft open this conversation with is some of the fundamental changes that you guys have seen within the recent past in the multifamily industry. And I know it could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but what are some of the major fundamental changes that we've seen in the recent past?
I think there's a lot of changes been going on over the last few years. Some of the biggest ones you're seeing a lot of new technology, and prop tech is becoming one of the hottest topics in real estate today. So adding technology and additional services within the space. And we're seeing a huge convergence on top of that between within the multifamily space, that's along the convergence of live, work, and play within our physical buildings.
Yeah, and we're seeing the same thing here. We got the mic working. Is that not only are we seeing the digital starting to impact onto the built world and how these companies are now adding in technology, whether it's as you just walk through a building and you have the front door, you might have a smart intercom system, and then as you walk into the common areas and get around, you could have whether it's a key fob system or whether it's another app that sends a beacon off your phone through Bluetooth, and then as you get into a unit, you might be able to use your phone to unlock your door and then have smart home technology within your within the home, and it's all being controlled by an app on your phone, and it's just everything's there. I mean, these weren't really things that were happening 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and we're starting to see more and more companies iterating on these processes and systems. And
if they were around, they were single point solutions, and many of them still are, right? And so that's a big change. I mean, definitely 5 years ago when we first started talking about this stuff, you had endless single point solutions. Nobody had an open API. There's no such thing as integrating. Nobody wanted to integrate until you got some owners and developers up here on stage saying, guys, how many dashboards can I sign into every day, right? And so we've come a long way in 5 years.
Yeah, and that's one thing too, when I was laying out each and one of those touch points, is that you might have one company and one app at the front door. You have a fob system for the common areas. You have another company that takes you in the smart home system. You have another app that opens up for community engagement and delivering packages, ordering food. And so this is something that like Alex's group now is starting to tackle, which is how do you get all of those into one platform so there's one app so that a tenant doesn't have to pull out their phone and they're walking around like, how do I get in and out of this building with 7 different apps?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to add to that. Essentially, there's huge amount of disjointed experiences today in buildings. And we said when the new changes, there's a numerous amount of services, numerous amount of technologies, multiple different mobile apps, and as a landlord, you don't want to touch it. It's really cost effective, and for the consumer, it's a mess. The user experience is very not joyful. And what we try to do is we're thinking of buildings as physical buildings now, is saying we need an operating system that interconnects all of these disjointed experiences and touch points and connects them with a unified operating system. Essentially one throat to choke. This basically handles all of your life within a building, from payments to renter's insurance to all of your on-demand services. I think that's kind of putting it all together is kind of the future of what we expect in real estate.
And there's so much to be learned about users of your buildings by way of having comprehensive operating system, by way of having data filtered through kind of one main hub, right? To be able to continue to customize and personalize experience to your residents and tenants, not just, we think they want a fitness center, it's likely they want a fitness center, they might want food service, they might want these amenities, but actually knowing based on their activity is a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a huge transformation of how we look and receive data as landlords, and be able to, with the right technology and the right experience, we can create amazing personalization for our residents to have an amazing residential experience, providing them products, services, amenities, and features that they use and want every day with quality type data and analytics. By creating this uniformity with an operating system, and taking that 30,000 foot overview, it's going to change how we build buildings. It'll help us build buildings that are going to be more utilized, better engagement, better activated spaces, and more importantly, as in long-term apartment owners, we can solve pain points on how to operate and manage buildings better, more efficiently by streamlining processes and understanding where our pain points are as property managers. And then the most important thing is the residents will have the best residential experience. Yep. So customer experience, it's kind of all revolves and starts with that. And I think that's the future amenity of buildings. It won't be an amenity race, but it'll be an experience race.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like even think about this floor that we're on right now, which I don't know how many office buildings constructed 30 years ago would have a big open space like this and have a common area and a kitchen and a place to get food and snacks. And this is something that has been starting to be rolled out, and people go, we like this. This is good. I want to go work in a place where I can go down and work out, grab lunch, have this all within our building, especially on a cold winter day like today where it's raining and it's nasty outside. And so now you get these new construction buildings that are building in these spaces and really working on tenant engagement. And
how are some of, just general cultural changes at large affecting multifamily real estate strategy? Things like transportation is undergoing massive disruption, if you will, connectivity. We talked about access controls, and even things like packaging and I mean, the nature of people ordering things from Amazon even, right? How are those things affecting kind of resident expectations?
Yeah, I mean, just packages in and of itself is that. So my background too is I came from the Larimar Group as a property manager. They own and manage about 15,000 units nationwide, and within 9-4 Ventures, Larimar is a partner of ours. And so I head up their pilot committee and their program to be able to test and pilot technologies. And so I'm talking to them on a daily basis to say, what do you guys want? What are your needs? And so on day one, I asked them, I'm like, what's the 3 most important things I should focus on? And it was packages, utilities, and locks. And so they're like, packages, help us solve packages, that's the #1 thing. And within the Larimar portfolio is you have small buildings, large buildings, old buildings, new, some that are suburban, some that are urban, some have on-site management, some don't have anyone on site. So you have to be able to find solutions to all of these problems. So one building, a package locker system might work. But in another building, there's not even room for a package locker system because the building was constructed 90 years ago and they weren't thinking about that. Right. And so you have to be able to find solutions to fit as many of these properties as possible.
Yeah, I would add to a lot of the things and iterate on is I think the biggest change we're going to see, and it's already starting, it's equivalent to when buildings started providing Wi-Fi to residents and tenants, and then infrastructure. The new version of that is unified access control. We believe our large thesis of future of commercial real estate will come from a unified access control system that will basically help unlock revenues and experiences within buildings while streamlining processes. And what's one of the major things we're tackling today is creating compatibility across a plethora of types of access control systems to be able to communicate through one unified system. Starting with that portion, you can then move on to solving other problems and efficiencies. Package management being one of the biggest issues, and the reason no one wants to tackle is it's a large cost center and no one wants to take responsibility. But I think there's an advantage for solving that problem within buildings if you can establish an internal logistics system. So think of essentially controlling every package that comes into the building. If you can establish the tasks and time engine to basically control and deliver those packages into the unit, so from curb to sofa is what people are calling it. Essentially, by establishing that, you then are going to help complete this full supply chain. So everyone's focused on distributors, last mile, but as soon as it gets to the building, the biggest pain point has been that all these digital and physical transactions have all been broken. Today, if we've created a software that'll help basically automate that process, we think it'll be a combination of package lockers along with an internal logistics. So think of a dedicated runner basically delivering those packages, creating amazing user experience, and in the future, there's more abilities to unlock new revenues from that.
And the nature of having that underlying operating system to kind of control each one of these pieces as that hub is so crucial to kind of evolving your building as new technology continues to change. And this time next year, there'll be a whole host of new opportunities and cultural changes and factors that we can't possibly anticipate. And it's a strange kind of place to get used to in a world of perpetual change. How do we hedge bets? How do we make technology investments? And it's a tremendous challenge.
Absolutely. And I would think about your buildings to be equivalent to, think of what Microsoft did to a computer with their operating system, think of what Apple iOS did to the telephone, and think about what Tesla is doing to cars. That is what's Lively's opportunity is to become the operating system for your buildings, which will help you not worry becoming obsolete. Going and downloading an app, you're then at a disadvantage because the hardware is going to change, the app's going to change. But if you build and control an operating system that continues to evolve and it creates compatibility across all these different touch points, that software will give you the advantage of your buildings. And that's the future of what's going to be considered a smart building. It's not going to be Internet of like IoT device that connects to your light bulb or your thermostat, but how is your building interconnected through an operating system? And that'll help you with basically fads of technologies and hardware. If you build a software and you have an operating system, which we're providing today, we're going to unlock new revenue streams for landlords. We're going to reduce operating expenses. We're going to create better retention, and at the same time streamline your processes within buildings. So I think our buildings could be in the future considered undervalued because they're going to become the largest marketplaces in the world, because every single person transacts in a building, whether where they live or where they work. So essentially, prop tech has the ability to do what the internet has done. Now, prop tech could become the largest asset class in the world.
Very interesting. And is it safe to say that in the future, building systems should plug in and update just like an app on your iPhone as a layer on top of your operating system, where you could even remove it and add a new one if it's relevant?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at what we're building and what we think about as an entire global thesis, yes, it essentially, you'll have a full operating system. Whenever something needs an upgrade, it upgrades your entire building the same way your software does, the same way your telephone says, please upgrade or downgrade, please remove or connect. It'll be essentially a super universal compatible software. Yeah. The same way that Apple integrates your telephone, your computer, your Apple TV. Think of that enterprise solution within your buildings. It's very, very needed. And instead of being a cost center, it's going to be a huge revenue generator for you. Yeah. Think of like what the Apple Store has done for Apple. You have a giant Apple Store when you own a building. Right. You are that marketplace.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that. And as you get different services, so like let's say dog walkers or house cleaners that people are, they're more and more, it's becoming more prevalent, is that you now need to have that person be able to, okay, so I'm at home, I'm booking my dog walker, I want them to be here between 11 and noon, and okay, now they come to the building. If they can't get in my building without a keypad or me buzzing them in or something like that, but it'd be, what we're seeing now is that within that operating system, within that app, is I can grant them access to get into the building at 11, get into my front door, my unit at 11 o'clock, take my dog out, walk around, come back, and then I also get the timestamps of, okay, yeah, they did go on an hour walk with my dog, and because that's when they came and that's when they left. But then a year from now, that dog walking service may not be as relevant anymore. There might be something better, and so to be able to come in and say, all right, let's move company A out, bring a company B, and that's going to provide a better experience for our residents. That's something that,
you need
that
that
we
agility.
want.
Yeah.
We don't want to be locked into something. And I think the world's going to keep changing, and people are going to be coming up with better and better ideas, and so it's having that flexibility.
I think we can say for certain that it'll keep changing, and we know that we know what we don't know coming down the road, and so how do we prepare for that? Kind of prepare for the unknown. And it's kind of an interesting place to be. Ryan, what are some of the challenges that still exist in adopting new technology in the multifamily space?
Yeah, I mean, it's time. It's the learning about the product. Where I sit on the pilot committee is that we have within the pilot program we have a committee who sets up, and there's eight people on, and they all have different backgrounds. So whether it's accounting and IT and construction and property managers and marketing, is that they all bring a different viewpoint. And so what we're doing is saying, well, instead of just coming in and being like, all right, company A, this sounds great. Let's bring it to one person. They see it. Okay, well, I think this is good. Well, now go talk to IT. Then you go talk to IT. And then you go, well, IT goes, okay, well, I kind of like this. Well, you should go talk to marketing, and all of a sudden it's 3 months later, 6 months later, it just takes forever. So what we wanted to do is say, all right, how can we speed up this process? Well, let's get some of these key stakeholders who all bring a different viewpoint to the table and get them on the first demo. And that way we might be able to say, okay, IT's really feeling this product, marketing not so much. Okay, what are the questions? What are the things that we need to ask this new technology company, and what are the hurdles? But then, as we get to say, like, all right, we're going forward, we're going to adopt this, it's what's that plan, and what's that integration look like? And I think for a lot of new technology companies, what makes it easier on a company like Larimar's to say, here's our roadmap. It's a 45-day plan, and 5 days we're going to be here, 10 days here, 20 days here, and then that way they can go, all right, here's all the stakeholders that need to be involved in the process. I think that just it makes it easier versus someone figuring out, like, okay, now we should get marketing involved, now we should get property managers involved, and that just, you got to schedule each one.
And trying to translate the value proposition through their lens, as IT versus marketing versus property management, whoever it is.
And patience. It's always going to take longer than you want. The runway for a real estate company is longer than a technology company. They're longer term holds. Technology companies, you might have 12 months of runway before your cash runs out, or 18 months, and so it's knowing it's going to be a little bit longer of a process.
Yeah, what's another thing that's just amazing that you've seen of a huge change that hasn't been around, real estate companies having innovation departments and pilot programs is nuts. Like that never existed until recently. Now you have you need a technology department or a person. You need an innovations department, and you need a pilot department as you're scaling a true portfolio. I think that says a lot about where prop tech is going and how much transformation is, and I think we're in the infancy stage. So to be competitive, I think it's comparable to what happened to the trading floor, the CBOE, and essentially basically going from the floor to the screen. And that's essentially what's about to happen within commercial real estate.
Yeah, companies have figured out that you can't just stay. The status quo won't work. You need to continually evolve and come up with these new technologies and ideas.
Well, and I think a lot of the specifically large portfolio owners have seen a lot of really beautiful investments kind of come and go, kind of pass them over because they weren't equipped to evaluate the opportunities when they arrived, right? And so they learn from that, and they say, all right, maybe I need to hire somebody internally to be the expert and evaluate this opportunity to see if it's a fit for my portfolio, so that I don't miss the opportunity to invest in WeWork or whoever it might be again, right? And you do see a lot of funds, right, opening up, building owners and portfolio owners actually dedicating dollars to tech investment and ensuring the success of those investments by deploying in their portfolios as well as their LPs.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is companies don't want to be left behind, and so you get the big giants of the Greystars or the EQRs or they're doing it, well I should be doing it, or if this group is doing it, well I need to be doing it. And so if you can be one of those first groups that gets in, you might have a little bit of a competitive advantage, which as we're seeing today is somewhat of the later endings of the real estate cycle, is that every operator is trying to just turn that last screw and try to get that last little bit, and it's a fight to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to, add to that. Lively's entire birth was based on essentially taking the biggest 30 or 35 of some of the biggest names across the country, like Related, like Equity, or EQR, Golub, Fifield, CA Ventures, and they actually invested as strategic investors, and they wanted to have that competitive advantage to basically be able to be a distribution and pilot of the future of what opportunity that will unlock these new revenues. Because essentially every dollar of revenue that we can increase to our NOI, it can increase the value of our property 20 times, which makes us more competitive in the space.
Absolutely. And we've seen that play out now. There's real information to showcase. I think the nature of piloting a technology and being part as a building owner or an occupier, being part of shaping the success of that technology is so crucial. And a lot of you sitting here in the audience that have portfolios or work within a portfolio, it's something really to think about. It's not just evaluate the opportunity for implementation and hope that this is the right technology for me, but it's really the opportunity. Man, it's kind of a historic moment in commercial real estate to be able to have your hands so deep in shaping some of these companies and what the future of this space will look like. I mean, I've heard a lot of companies, even in the multifamily space, that rent Airbnbs to do product tests and make sure their light sensor works or their remote control water sensor works or whatever it happens to be, because nobody will let them pilot the tech. So a lot of you in the audience have this great opportunity with tech companies that are in beta, they're pre-launch, even if they are post-launch, they want to do pilots. They're hungry for doing a pilot. They want to learn with you. So it's a unique moment in time to have that opportunity. I want to just next talk a little bit about the nature of co-living, concepts like Airbnb. How are concepts like these more transient living spaces, how are they changing the nature of multifamily real estate strategy? Or what's your take?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, we have a sizable investment in Stay Alfred, which is I'll call it a hotel Airbnb hybrid. And so they'll come into a Class A urban downtown property, and maybe it's a 200-unit property, and they'll come in and lease 2 full floors, take up 20 units, and they will operate it as an Airbnb property. But you have a similar feel and a similar experience whether you're staying in a Stay Alfred unit in Seattle, in Phoenix, or in Nashville. You're gonna have the same experience. So it's like taking some of the best of the hotel experience with some of the best of the Airbnb, but without paying or playing the Airbnb roulette of, all right, well, I signed up for this unit, what am I getting in today?
Right.
Yeah, I would love to add to. I think that is really where the expertise is going to become into being able to compete in the future of development, especially whether you're in office, apartments, or hospitality. All three are converging today. So within our space, we think of, I'm the co-founder of Flats, which Flats, think of Soho House meets WeWork of apartments with amenity-rich environments, converging live, work, and play in one building. So you have apartments upstairs, you have F&B downstairs, you have amenity-rich environments that you would have within fitness, and now we also self-perform and work with companies like Stay Alfred to essentially add Airbnb into our buildings to essentially increase yield management, absorption, and NOI by basically creating this convergence of having apartments and hospitality and some flex workspace in one physical environment, which will in general in the future drive huge amounts of new revenue and increase your NOI. And then when you think about Flats, we were one of the first lifestyle branded multifamily apartment brand to create a branded product. Not a branded company, but think of what you see in hospitality, bringing a hotel brand to multifamily. And we did this within the micro space, which I think is a very much similar segment as co-living, except we I think are a little bit different in the spectrum. But I think between co-living and micro, changing how people live, how activated their communities are, and I think what it really does solve for is the affordability crisis across the country. I think micro and co-living has a really great niche to create synthetic affordability. So it creates lower chunk prices by at the same time being able to provide amazing amenity-rich environments and living essentially within buildings. So I think there's a huge marketplace. More so in micro, I think co-living has more of a separate, smaller niche, but micro essentially I think is the solution to the affordability crisis by creating synthetic affordability.
Yeah, and just to tag on to what he said here about the yield optimization is that companies are looking for different ways to increase revenue, increase their net operating income, and so if you had if historically a 200 unit building was 200 units of Class A apartments, well, today it might be 180 units of Class A apartments, 15 units of a Stay Alfred or some sort of co-living type concept, and then maybe 5 units of corporate housing, as they're trying to figure out what is that mix that gets us the highest yield on the building. So I think it's a space that it's merging together, and people are trying to figure out.
And a really great example, I just saw an article, and I think it's really amazing to see how fast it's changing. I saw RXR announced that in one of their office buildings in Manhattan, they're going to take an entire floor of an office building and essentially throw in Airbnb units on an entire floor. So you're going to start seeing literally short stay Airbnb thrown into office spaces on an entire floor. I also think as retail becomes more challenging, you might, and I'm already seeing this in New York, you're starting to see short stay go into retail or into strips, and then affordable units or apartments going into malls or shopping centers. So you're really seeing a huge convergence in different uses across obsolete uses.
Very, very interesting. And I think, it's so interesting. This conversation is so, I don't want to say similar, but really adjacent to the workplace as a service session that we'll hear about later, because it's really just speaks to how culture is shifting. People want that more flexible, on-demand, custom, and there's so many different flavors of, let's say, workplace as a service, which really translates here to the nature of co-living or, micro, like you mentioned, and you almost have a flavor for any different type of resident or occupant, depending on how you work, depending on how you live, depending on a million factors. We're all so different, and the real estate really starting to speak to that. It's very interesting. I'm sorry, do you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say, it seems like almost everything is going into the direction of as a service.
Yeah.
Today I just spoke with someone about IT and understanding is IT as a service and
Sure.
subdividing through join. I thought it was fascinating.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And one of the other things is within our Lively technology, we've already been beta and testing what we believe to be that we are the first in is amenity as a service. So essentially taking all of the underutilized amenities, activating them, and essentially creating amenity as a service. So from flex workspace to fitness to co-working to across their own tenants, across a network of buildings.
And I think owners and developers specifically, they're starting to really recognize the opportunity for programming their building in the pre-development phase, right? Because there's a level of market research that really speaks to, based on the price points that you need to fill your units, who's going to fill this building, right? Based on the local companies that just moved in, whoever's in the local area within X mile of a radius of the building, understanding who those tenants are going to be, programming the building accordingly, and then marketing to those individuals, not just, let's say, marketing all of Chicago and hoping that you fill your building, right? Being really, purposeful and having an intention behind programming the building so that it's really custom to your audience. Sorry,
and in the development process too, it's a long process. It could be 2 years on the short end. If you go into a place like California, it could be 10 years by the time you say, I'm going to buy this piece of land, and by the time it opens. And so you have to go through that and figure out what are people going to want 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, and try to build flexible enough space to be able to accommodate what could happen 3 years from now.
Right. Are there any main kind of lessons or takeaways you would want to leave this audience with? And I still have a final question after this, so don't give us your final, but what are some of the major lessons or takeaways that they can, learn from you guys?
I think one, it's the way that I look at companies, either on the investment side or from piloting and rolling out into a portfolio, is just what is disruptive. We want to find the disruptive companies that aren't just creating the incremental changes, because we get into the thing that we call the incumbent advantage, where there might be a group in the real estate world of multifamily. There's Yardi and RealPage are like the two biggest groups in terms of a property management system. And once you kind of go with a Yardi or a RealPage, you're kind of stuck in that system, and they may come out with a chatbot or some other listing type service or something like that. And so it's to try to find out how to not just make those incremental increases, because then the property manager is going to go, well, we already have something that's kind of like that. So how is your thing 10 times better, 2 times better? Is it cheaper? How, is it easier to use? I mean, those are the types of things that we want to see, is that how can you come in and be impactful so that you can get a giant corporation to actually move and get everyone moving in the same direction and go, yeah, let's do that. That's what's going to make the change. And then we can go replicate that amongst 50 other giant organizations.
Sure.
Add to some of the way that we would look at is, don't be penny wise and dollar foolish. Plan for the future. Understand the infrastructure and understanding the whole global scope of what you're trying to accomplish. Because what I think happens is, if you take the shortcut within the technology, you're going to have, what I'm learning is, a lot of technical debt. And that's going to cost a lot of money in the future, piecing it all together. So it's almost doing like a lipstick. When I think of building technology, I think of construction now. So it's like when you do a full new construction or do a full gut renovation, you really create a really great longevity of that product. But when you do a lipstick renovation, you're just putting lipstick on a pig, and at the end of the day, your maintenance, your operations are going to be really disjointed, and you're going to be very costly over the long run. So if you're taking a long-term approach, you really should understand and see what you think that future looks like, and how do you put it all together. And I think that's the right approach. I think when people worry about technologies changing, it's because you're doing it piecemeal. If you really think of it as like an overall view, that's the right approach. And it might be a little bit more money up front, but in the long run, you'll definitely get your NOI.
We'll talk about this a lot more in our Developing a Smart Building session a little bit later this afternoon. Okay, so this is my last question, and it's, what does the future of living and staying look like? And it could be, short-term, long-term. This is all speculation, but I want to hear from you guys.
So I really again, full disclosure, I'm co-founder for Flats. So I think of an ecosystem really much of what we've built with Flats, with the true convergence of live, work, play in one physical ecosystem, of having apartments, having feeling like you're living in a hotel with hospitality living, amenity-rich environments, and having all of that within physical buildings. You're seeing that across all new developments. But I think the future is layered with lively. And I think essentially taking the physical environment and converging with the digital environment. So when everyone was focused on live, work, and play, the future will be live, work, and play layered with a digital ecosystem that will basically be a full automation. Think of one mobile app or one application that's unified, that controls your access, your payments, your package management, your maintenance, your communication, and all your services within your buildings, because that'll essentially be one unified ecosystem.
And it's really to remove the friction of having each one of these individual experiences within your building, right? And just being able to access things with ease from wherever you might be.
Yeah, that's correct. That's definitely it, is to provide the most services you can for your residents, but also have it just a seamless experience and make it easy. You don't want it to be too hard, and because then they might just, I don't want to deal with this, and they'll move on and they'll try something else. But
We've all used technology and said that at one point.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, how many different apps do you have in your phone, but what are the ones that you actually use the most? And so you don't want to have too many on there that it gets confusing. And then, I also see it as buildings becoming less just one type use, so less just pure office, less pure multifamily, less pure retail, that you're going to get that mix. You're going to try to figure out, how can you keep someone within that building for the most hours of the day?
Right, interesting. We see a lot of vertical campuses, and that term being thrown around in that nature. Excellent. I appreciate you both participating, and thank you.
Thank you.